Welcome to Influence Unpacked with Marion, the series where we explore what drives success in influencer marketing for mobile apps and games. Influence Unpacked is powered by AppsFlyer, bringing you insights from top marketers who innovate, elevate, and succeed.
Today, I'm joined by Alina, Growth Marketing Manager at 10 Square Game. Alina, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, so before we get started, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your journey in marketing?
For sure. So I started my journey in influencer marketing 7 years ago. I always wanted to be working in user acquisition, but I will say influencer marketing was quite an unexpected turn in my career, which I don't regret. Of course, I worked on various projects, started with Pixonic and War Robots, this multiplayer PvP battle. Then I worked on a publisher side in AppQuantum, and for the last 3 years, I've been working with 10 Square Games, first as an influencer marketing leader, now I'm a growth marketing manager as well.
Okay, great. And so how do you approach influencer marketing in your role at 10 Square, especially for the apps the games actually, that you're advertising? And can you tell us a little bit more about those two games that you're working on?
Sure. So the main two games in 10 Square Games are Fishing Clash and Hunting Clash. It's obviously fishing and hunting simulators. It's not typical mobile games, like it has very narrow audience for lovers of fishing and hunting. And we leverage influencer marketing and user acquisition channel. So we look at ROI at the first, but of course we keep in mind its influence on organic growth, on user engagement, and on retargeting.
Okay. So you do look at the full extent of like influencer marketing in terms of like how it can impact your metrics. So I think before we actually get into the strategy and everything that you do, it would be really interesting for the audience to understand how do you look at performance, how do you look at measurement for those two games?
Sure. I think everyone who works with influencers and influencer marketing knows that measuring ROI and performance is the most difficult part of it, simply because most of the traffic comes from organic. So we found a solution here at 10 Square Games. We use gift codes, which really help us greatly to measure performance properly. And as MMP, we have AppsFlyer, so we can see traffic coming directly through the links. And also on our site, we can see organic installs like of people who used gift codes.
Okay. And so if you're leveraging gift codes, are they like limited in time? Are they limited to only new players? How do you go about the fact that probably they might be shared outside of the influencer's audience? Like, do you see any traffic coming from like community pages or stuff like that?
So for sure, if you use gift codes, players will share them anyway, so you should be aware of it. There are a few tactics how you can deal with that on your site. So first of all, what we do, we use unique gift codes for each influencer, for each campaign. So like we have this granularity. We do limit it to new players only. For instance, players who install the game after a certain period of time. We also, if you're afraid, for example, that this gift code will be shared with your community, so it can prevent them from it, but also we don't include like very expensive rewards in these gift codes that could affect FTV like massively. So it's something very minor like cosmetics or some like very small top-ups like that.
Okay. And then do you, like in terms of like analysis, do you look into then how many gift codes were redeemed by influencer? You look at then the track traffic as well, and how do you go around with the organics?
So how it looks, right? Then influencer makes an integration, like they make this call to action to download the game by using a link, and also they share their gift codes. So on our site, then we see traffic starts coming through. We split this traffic into several parts. So one of them is direct traffic through AppsFlyer link. So we track this user separately. We also have few groups of organic traffic of those users who redeemed gift code. So yes, what we do check is how many players who didn't click the link redeemed the gift code. So we attribute them to influencer marketing. But also it's important to remember that I wouldn't say like a big part, but significant part of these installs, they will be attributed to traffic sources like Apple search ads or Google ads when you launch the campaign. And for example, in countries like United States, it might be not very visible, but if you do launch on a new market, you can see clearly how big effect is. So it's also important to keep that in mind when you evaluate individual performance.
Okay. And for someone that has never done influencer marketing for the app or game, would you recommend for them to then start on a smaller country so they can better evaluate the performance, or should they go on like bigger countries because maybe that's where they can find the best balance between prices of the creator and the value of the users they can acquire?
I would say each approach has its pros and cons. Of course, the main market for everyone is tier one English-speaking countries, right? Like United States, biggest market. And if you go for that first, it has its advantages, like influencers got used to sponsor promotions. You can expect them deliver materials in certain period of time. They follow guidelines. They have much more verticals, etc., etc. So it will be probably easier to set up the campaign. However, if you are not sure that you will generate like this amount of traffic, right? If you have, for example, a big organic presence, you can start with some smaller markets. So what we do, for example, we found like this entering new markets as one of the options to scale, because sooner or later you will reach out with saturation, right? It's also important to remember that other markets, but the US, they usually have much higher conversions. So if you start, for example, with European country or Asian country, and you see a CVR like 1% and 1.5% from view to install, and you can make wrong assumptions that you will have the same in America, in the US market. And it's simply not true. Like maybe 6-7 years ago, it was like that, but now this market is so saturated. Users got used to all these ads, so it will be much, much less. You should be aware of it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Are you able to share some sort of range for the conversion rate from views to installs in the US, or at least tier one markets? Because you said like, so 1.5% for like other geos. But then for people to get an understanding of the scale, like the difference between those two markets.
Yeah, for sure. I will say it really depends on the vertical, how relevant this vertical is to your app, and engagement rate of the influencer, of course, as well. How well they can make integration, how creative they are, how they interact with their audience, right? The more creative they are, like the higher conversions you can expect. So you should take a look at all of that. But I will say in general, something between 0.1 is the worst case scenario, not the worst, but pessimistic, I would say. Till in the best cases, maybe 0.91%.
Thank you very much for this. I think it's going to be very helpful for many people that are sort of like doing estimation, also to try and budget how much they should invest, right? Because as you said, like we know most of the traffic is going to be coming organically, right? So it's important that people understand how much they need to invest to see an organic spike. And so those conversion rate will definitely help. And what I usually do is like make different scenarios. You were talking about like pessimistic one. So pessimistic, medium, and optimistic to try and see how much traffic they can expect from like YouTube integrations, for example. One last question that I had about gift codes, because you've mentioned like giving away low values items. Is this something that you've sort of A/B tested, like different types of items, whether it's like in-game currencies or like vanity items? And if you have, what was the sort of result, and in which direction are you following currently?
I would say yes, we did some A/B tests at the beginning. However, later I stopped doing that. So we now simply focusing on giving something very basic, cosmetics, because new users who watch the ad, they probably don't really understand, like they don't know how much it really costs, right? So they just see something catchy the eye. So what I noticed is if you're afraid of this gift code to be shared within your community or somewhere else, you should probably not go for too expensive stuff, like for hard currency and something like that, because they will share and we can't avoid that, unfortunately. But yeah, I would say in general, no. Now we just stick to adding some cosmetics items and some simple top-ups. We refresh these gift codes like every few months, just not to get, very annoying for audience with the same stuff every time.
Okay. Yeah. Again, that makes total sense. So moving forward, so we've talked about one of the biggest challenge, which is obviously measurement and attribution, right?
Yeah.
You've quickly touched upon scaling limits, right? Because you have very specific games with specific niche audiences. So I'm curious, and you've mentioned like actually opening other countries. So how do you go about scaling, and at what point sort of did you reach your scaling maximum in tier one countries?
So right. First thing, of course, as you mentioned, is entering a new market. So in the United States and tier one English-speaking countries, we launch campaigns every month. Of course, course, it depends what options we will find. Like budget can vary, like be a bit smaller or bigger. Then you enter a new market, such as Germany, for example, shows great results in Europe, or Taiwan or Korea and Japan in the Eastern market. But the problem, for us at least, with our super targeted audience, is that we can't really find a lot of options so often as we do in the English-speaking market. So I would say for those countries, we launch campaigns maybe once per year or twice per year, depending. Also, like I really try to mix different strategies and to see what works and what doesn't. For example, if you have gift codes, it really opens you great opportunity not to be stick to certain dates of launch of the campaign. For example, if you don't have in the game, you need to launch influencers in the same days, like 2-3 days, and see the spike of organics, right? However, if you have a gift code, you can track these users anytime they redeem them, right? So, for example, if agency reaches out to me and say, hey, here is 2 cool influencers in Germany, like, can we launch them? For me, like, what matters is like final results, right? So, yeah, why not? We can do that as well. So I'm not very stick to these limits, of timeline. However, if it's campaign like on a new market like Korea or Taiwan, yes, we do launch them in the same period of time, simply to align it with our other activities like ISO or featuring, etc.
Okay. And you mentioned agencies. So I'm curious, like at 10 Square, are you the only one doing influencer marketing? And if so, how do you manage the workload? Because that's one of the biggest questions as well. Like, people don't really understand how much time it takes to, set up the campaign, launch the campaigns. Do you have tools in-house or tools like you use for like influencer research, management, etc.? Do you work with agencies? And if you can give us some sort of like range of like how many creators do you have go live every month, that would really, I think, help people understand like the scope of it.
Yeah, sure. So yes, I'm the only person who is doing influencer marketing at the moment. It does take a lot of time. You know it as no one else probably. So for that, we work with agencies. So I consider agencies as extension to our marketing team, basically. So currently, maybe 5 to 7 agencies. It depends. Like, we don't commit on any budget, a minimum budget per month. It all depends on the options they will bring. So like, if you
Okay.
deliver good options, yes, we will work for sure. So what was the next question? Sorry, you mentioned?
No, I think you answered, and I think I wanted to add on top of that, like, because you've mentioned 5 or 7 agencies, and I think it really depends on like how sort of niche is the audience that you want to target, because then you need more hands on deck to try and find those creators. But then having more agencies can also lead to some issues and problems. From my experience, like working with multiple of them, you might end up with agencies sharing the same names. So then potentially the creators get contacted multiple times, which might lead them to think that they're very important, and then that you really want to work with them, which might lead to then increased prices, right? So do you segment in any way the agency that you're working with, or is it more like, okay, open, and I'm just keen to see what type of influences can you find for me?
All right. Yes, you're right. I personally don't track like if they reach out to the same influencer or not. Like in 3 years, we had maybe 5 to 10 cases. Then the same influencer was reached out by the same agency. And yes, sometimes they do increase their price. But what I also noticed is when you work with 1-2 agencies, like you need to be really careful with prices that they will bring, because I often saw like the same influencer like cost like one amount with agency X, and then second agency like gives price like twice less, or like, like 10K less. And you're like what's going on, basically?
That's a big difference, yeah.
Difference, of course. So it also depends on the relationships these agencies have with influencers or with talent agencies, right? Like, it depends, like if we talk directly with influencer or the management, or they also work for some mediator, like so many factors. So that's why I always try to find like the best deal for us. And yes, if I see like one agency is consistently delivering us like much higher price, like of course there is a question like why it's happening.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And I think that's one of the things that people really need to pay attention to when they pick the agencies, like the sort of margin that they're working with, because I've seen it go from 20 to 35, 40%. And obviously it makes a big difference. And especially if you're doing performance driven campaigns where you need to hit a certain CPM to hit your ROI goals, it will like set up yourself for like failure if obviously the prices are much higher. So I think in a way it's a good thing to have at least several agencies to be able to compare prices and challenge them and making sure that they will deliver you the best prices. And at the same time, something you've mentioned is you don't give them a set budget, which means probably you have your full budget for the month or the year. And then basically who comes with the best influencers at the best price, the fastest, will get the highest share of the budget, I suppose, which again increases competition in a way, make sure that you get probably the best prices.
Right. So this is the approach. Like, for example, yes, we have monthly budget and we can book influencers in advance, like 2 max, 3 months max, I would say, because it's very tricky to book some big influencer like what now is March. So, for example, they come to me and say like, okay, we have a deal for June, but you never know what happens with this influencer like in 2 months, how the views will change, right? And you can commit on one price and then later just see it doesn't worth it anymore.
So we've talked about agencies, we've talked about the creators, about measurement. Can you tell us a little bit more about what type of creator do work for your two apps? Because you're targeting what, male 35 plus, interested in fishing, hunting, and similar sort of hobbies. Can you tell a little bit more about like platforms and then sort of formats that do perform best for you?
Sure. So regarding platforms, it's YouTube, number one, always performs the best for mobile apps, simply because videos last like for long and they keep delivering views and installs like even after months after the integration, right? Fishing Clash has very narrow audience, and sooner or later, if you have similar product, you will face a challenge how to scale, where to find new creators. For example, with fishing, obviously your number one choice is fishing channels or outdoor channels. So you go to fishing channels and after 6 months you realize that audience overlaps a lot. Like the same people watch the same channels and like CPI going higher and higher. In our case, what I noticed for Fishing Clash, that CPMs and CPIs not always correlate with performance, surprisingly. Another thing is that we always recheck performance after like certain periods, like 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, because early results always, like in 90%, yes, we do correlate, but like there are also a big number of channels where they don't correlate at all. So you can make predictions based on your day 7 or day 10 results and assume that your campaign will pay off. But later you check it and like you see it didn't grow. So for this like challenge, yes, I do revalue them, recalculate results in certain months.
Yeah, I think it's something that is really important to mention and for marketers to understand is, especially when you work with YouTube, right? Because as you said, the videos are live, sort of lifetime, right? So they will keep generating views, they will keep generating installs. So the long tail is very important. And when you measure the performance, whether it is day 7, day 10, day 30, you think this is the end of the campaign, but then you should definitely revisit it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from then, because the campaign is going to keep, the performance of the campaign is going to keep improving. So definitely something to keep in mind when doing the analysis and not only look at really short-term period when it comes to the results.
Mhm.
Moving forward, I'd love if you could share like any strategy or tactic that worked really well for your influencer campaigns.
Some tactics, yes, for sure. So first of all, I would recommend highly to use gift codes if you can. Talk to your product team, talk to your developers. If you can find some solution for that, it will simplify so many things for you. Second, when it comes to creatives, so like I think still a lot of marketers rely on simple shout-outs like 60, 90 seconds, right? You reach out to influencers and ask them to do that. But as I said, in the United States, at least conversions dropped a lot during last years. So you should really start thinking not only from data perspective, but from creative perspective. You should, for example, what I do, then I reach out to a new channel or agencies reach out to them. I always ask myself the question like, why these people come to this channel to watch this influencer? What are we trying to find there, right? And okay, if it's not fishing vertical, if it's like some different vertical for us, like DIY, what parallel I can draw? Like between our game and like this type of audience, what can trigger them? And for these influencers, I try to adjust our briefs, like focus on this, focus on that, but always stay authentic, stick to your personal style, don't sound too TV-like, because people feel it. And yeah, as I said, what worked before nowadays simply don't.
No, definitely. And I remember seeing an integration with Dude Perfect where I think you created some custom in-game item for them. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So for big influencers, it's always tricky. If you pay a big budget for them, you always risk a lot, right? So to minimize this risk, what we do at 10 Square Games, we create these in-game integrations with some big channels that worth it. And this strategy so far has been working really well for us. I think one disadvantage is that you can't do it very often because it puts pressure on the product team. So with Dude Perfect, the challenge was we wanted to work with someone big to see like its impact, but we needed to make sure we do everything on our side to make it as smooth as possible. For Dude Perfect, we created this in-game event. We called it after their name. We bought their license rights to use their faces basically in the game for a certain period of time. And then we used opportunities we had to create kind of like, styled fish, like made in this style of Dude Perfect channel. So yeah, it worked pretty well for us. We still see like traffic coming from this integration, but it was like 2 years ago. But since it was like a massive amount of use, not only direct installs and people who read in the gift code show like great performance, but also it boosted our position in stores. Like for example, in App Store in the US, right after integration for a few months, like we were like on the higher positions because of that.
So I guess so it definitely boosted like conversion rate from views to installs, right? Because anything that is related to their favorite influencer, the audience will want to collect somehow. And then in the game, so you've mentioned the special fish. Were there items that people could purchase directly in the shop, or was it like you drove players to play a certain event? What was the sort of mechanic there?
Yep. So it was an event where people could enter the game, and by redeeming their gift codes, we get some boosters at the beginning. But the main motivation for them was progressing in this in-game event and getting these vanity packs with influencers at the end without a need to pay for it. So we don't really try to stick to this strategy where you add item that we need to pay because like product team doesn't really like it, and we think it's kind of manipulation of the player. But instead, we try to increase their retention by motivating them to stay as long as possible and playing the game as soon as possible. So yes, I would say the process itself, it took quite of time, of course. I would say like maybe 2 months in advance we started preparing. So first of all, if you want to do something similar with your game, you need to find influencer that will be a good fit for you. It can take some time. All this process of signing contracts, like details and likeness rights, etc., etc. Then you also need to discuss with your product team how it will work in the game. So our content team should prepare some items for this event, for Vanity Spark, Live Ops team should ideally think how they will monetize these players better when they come into your game. So it's like a complicated, complex process. There are a lot of teams involved, but at the end, you can expect really good result of that.
Okay. And so you mentioned like this was in the end like a really good campaign, which you did a couple of years ago. How often do you do it like per year, would you say?
I would say we try to find someone big maybe every 2-3 months. It doesn't always work this way because sometimes team have more, I would say, high priority task to focus on, right? So still now 3-4 times per year at least I try to do something like that because yes, otherwise we will stuck.
And do you always find like new influencers? You repeat some of them? What's your strategy around that?
Yeah, so when it comes to repeating influencers, I try not to work with the same channel more often than twice per year. So, for example, one integration went live, then in 6 months, 7 months, but you always need to check how their audience growth within this period. So we do work with the same influencers sometimes if they showed good results in the past, but I would say 80% of our integrations is new activations.
Okay, that makes sense. So going back again to the custom in-game integrations, I guess it's a lot of like test and learn, right? So you set up a first campaign with a creator, you see what's the user flow, you see what performs best. Do you do always the same type of integration then, or have you tested something else?
Yeah, so sometimes we do try something new. For example, our biggest success, one of the biggest success, I think, was a community event that we ran with two big American channels, it's Demolition Ranch and Cletus McFarland. One of them is focusing on firearms, and second is automotive channel. What is various connection with fish, right? You will ask us. So what we did, we had a feature in the game that allowed players to split into teams and then compete with each other. So we created a special event for them with Cletus and McFarland being avatars and basically hosts of this event. So they announced it on their channels like, hey, help me to compete and win the first prize, like my team will be the best. So players downloaded the game, they could pick up the team at the beginning and then they competed in duels. So this event, if I'm not mistaken, lasts for 7 days or something, and we saw great engagement. We saw people in the comments under this video complaining like, why is it open just for new players? Because we did it for only new players. Because I have been playing Fishing Clash and I can't join, like, just, you know. So that's why, coming back to retargeting thing, you should keep in mind that you also target your existing players probably. Of course, preparation to this event took us more time. So if it's something that you need to set up quickly, it should be something simpler. But if you have this opportunity, go for something really creative and you will see how it works.
And in terms of like content that you've asked from the influencers, like to promote this, was it only YouTube integration then, or did they post other stuff like along the way, or how did you go about this?
Yes, in their case, it were just YouTube integrations because then you ask for some extra deliverables from these big channels who usually increase prices, so we didn't really want to do that. It was simple YouTube integration. It wasn't something overly complicated, something overly creative, but it worked really well, especially Cletus part.
I think leveraging two creators audiences and making them competing each other, it's a really interesting way to drive even more engagement, I guess, especially with like more male orientated types of audiences, I suppose. So looking ahead, what do you think like are trends or shifts that you think will shape the sort of future for influencer marketing?
From my personal perspective, I think we will see more and more these creative integrations and in-product integrations when influencers become like a face in the game or in the product, or they will create their events. I see more and more things like that. Still surprisingly, not many companies do it, but this number is growing. Yes.
I think that the biggest challenge there is really like the communication with product and getting the resources internally to support this kind of integration. Like I remember from my experience, like back in the day, like working with Social Point, it took us many, many months to actually manage to convince the team to create like a specific dragon for a creator, because they didn't really see the point, because as you said, like they had a really busy roadmap and it was gonna require, you know, resources from the live ops team, from the art team, and etc. But now that you actually see some performance and like results and case studies from other companies that have done it, I hope that it's going to become like easier and easier for marketers to convince the product team to invest some time and effort into this kind of thing.
Yes, I agree with you. Like, luckily at 10 Square Games, we have quite flexible team. So if we come up with some crazy idea, like they always ready to listen and ready to experiment. And I think that's why we were able to achieve these results. But yes, if you have very busy roadmap for months ahead, right, it can be something very difficult to do. Second thing, what I think will worth doing is establishing this long-term relationship with influencers and making them ambassador basically of your game. So we slightly move from user acquisition part to building community, right? Then creators become part of your team basically, and you launch this creators program. There they advocate for your game. They announce like all latest updates and like they basically talk with people for you. I think it's kind of cool thing and it will grow as well, in my personal opinion.
Is this something that you're currently doing at 10 Square?
I wish we could. Unfortunately, it's very, when you're the only person dealing with influencer marketing, yes, sometimes it can become very, yes.
Yeah, because we see like multiple brands starting to do that, and some that have been doing that for a long time, like Supercell, right? Like I think that they're probably the best in the mobile gaming space when it comes to create a program. But I'd be curious to see like other companies starting doing that, maybe with games that have much more niche audiences, and see how this performs.
Yes, I agree.
I wanted to ask you a few questions. If you can share your insights, top of mind, okay?
Sure.
So what's one thing marketers should stop doing in influencer marketing?
You should stop relying on generic shout-outs and vanity metrics.
100%. I've had many guests like share this type of insight, and I think it is really important because I keep seeing people reviewing creators by numbers of followers, and this is just like not the way to go about it, right? Because if you look, for example, Instagram or even any other social media channel, they share 1.3 million followers, right? On paper, it looks really good. And then when you look at the reels or the posts themselves, you can actually see 30K views. Exactly, 30K views. And then one of them might be 1 million, but then overall, it doesn't really correlate, right? It's really important to look at engagement and actually the reach of those channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's one strategy or tactic that they should start doing right now?
If you can, then start using gift codes to track organics, 100%.
Yeah, that really helps with measurement. And I think it's really important, especially when you get started, to have everyone on board in your team and understanding, okay, what's going to be the methodology to measure creators. We need to accept that it's not going to be 100% accurate like other marketing channels, but as long as everybody's on the same page, it's going to make it a lot easier down the road. And once your campaign is over, to measure and ensure that everybody's happy with the way that things are measured.
Absolutely. So like these gift codes, they help you not only to attribute organic properly, but also to see LTV of its users. It helps you to gather more data, which you can use for building these LTV curves to actually compare YouTube with your other traffic sources. And yeah, I will say it's essential part.
One last question. So what's a proven approach that marketers should keep in their playbook?
I would say keep balancing between giving a creative freedom and actually following clear brand guidelines.
All right. So thank you so much, Alina, for joining me today. I think you shared a lot of really insightful take on influencer marketing. Where can people find you or learn more about what you do?
I will drop a link to my LinkedIn if anyone wants to connect. Just an invite. Yeah. Thank you, Marion.
Thank you so much. So that's it for today's episode of Influence Unpacked. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and follow for quick, actionable tips on influencer marketing for mobile apps and games. And if you're looking to dive deeper, check out my guide on the AppsFlyer website. It covers everything from setting up your first campaign to best practices and tools to measure success. You'll find the link in the post, and see you next time.